Okay, so that should be okay. All right, so I am going to get going as people come in. I know that this time of year, especially, there's so much going on and it's a Monday. So, but this is a new curriculum and incorporating Indigenous ways of knowing into the K-6 PE and wellness program. We are part of ARPDC, which is Alberta Regional Professional Development Consortia. I'm through the Edmonton Regional Learning Consortium, so I operate through the Edmonton location, although I live in Calgary. And we are funded by Learn Alberta, and I will also explain a little bit more about that as we go. I'll do a land acknowledgement first. So Tanse, I live on Treaty 7 land, which is the ancestral home of the Blackfoot people. Right here, I'm in Calgary. There are also Dene and Métis Nation number 3 people, which I belong to, as well as the Manitoba Métis Federation. All have contributed to the shape of Alberta and Canada, and I thank them for letting me live on this land with them that is theirs. If you know which treaty land you're on, or if you're not on treaty, well, by treaty land, or if I know there's 3 school divisions in Alberta that are not adjacent to a settlement or treaty land. If you know the land, the people that you're living on currently that were removed, you can always post that as well. But I'm going to get going with the presentation. So I am Tammy Johnson, as you know from registering for this. We're called Designers of Professional Learning now through ARPDC, which is kind of cool because we do a number of different things. And now that ARPDC, since COVID, I guess that's one of the realities, is that online presentations are really the thing, right? It makes it easier for, I know for myself, I oftentimes prefer that because trying to rush after, day teaching or whatever and trying to get to a session was always quite tough, especially if it was across town or something like that in a big school division. So it is nice to have these available online as well. So it's really nice. But we also work together to create curriculum and do other presentations. Like I'm working with the consortium in our RLC group to work on the Orange Shirt Day presentations this week. So I'll be hosting one on Thursday. So that's really cool. And we do other things together as well. I am Red River Métis from what is historically known as the Red River Settlement. And for anybody here who's Métis, we know each other by our last names. Mainly we can kind of tell where people are from generally. And so my mom's a Mowat, and the McDonald's on the other side, Mackay's and Beaudry. And Beaudry is an Alberta Métis Voyageur family that my family is related to as well, one of my great grandmothers. And Mackay's are throughout Alberta as well. That is a picture of my great grandpa, James Mowat, sitting there on the bench by the rocks. And there's a school and a park in Fort Saskatchewan and a street in Edmonton named after him. So it's James Mowat Elementary, Mowat Park, and James Mowat Trail, and it's spelled with 2 T's. But I always say it doesn't really matter. The last name was spelled M-O-A-D, but the English at Hudson Bay Company had a hard time understanding an Arcadian accent, apparently. That's how they spelled it with the T. The picture beside that is of my grandpa and his remaining brothers and sisters that survived. So he's the middle boy. His name was Rosser, and his 2 brothers and my great aunt Tassie that are there. So my family's from north of Winnipeg, Selkirk, Manitoba, and I did go to school in Winnipeg, and I ended up teaching in the same school division that I graduated high school from, Seven Oaks School Division, which, if anybody knows, is parts of it are still in the core area of Winnipeg. I taught along Main Street, one of the schools that was there, and that's in the north end of Winnipeg. And then moved to Calgary. I've been here almost 30 years. I worked a lot in special education, and I started working with Indigenous students then. I started doing this work actually after a project with Kataskanau Tribal Council and Ignite eLearning School Online. I took their outreach program for grades 7 to 9, and I indigenized it for their particular cultures, decolonized it, added land-based learning, Indigenous ways of knowing for them, and Cree language, and then worked with their specialists. So I didn't do it all on my own. I worked with their specialists with that. I had some really great help with that and consultation. And then the elders took what I had done, and they were really happy with what I had put together. And so I was encouraged to continue this work, and particularly to help other educators to understand how to do some of this, particularly non-Indigenous educators, not just non-Indigenous, because there's also Indigenous teachers who aren't sure how to go about some of this. So that's really my goal, is to be able to help you guys in creating lessons and infusing Indigenous ways of knowing into the learning that the kids are having. Yeah, so with that said, I'll go on. So ARPDC does have some amazing resources already made. So I always want to point those out, especially for First Nations, Métis, and Inuit resources that have been created and funded already through the province. So fellow educators, and I've all got it set up so it automatically propagates this page with that stuff on it. But if we go, you can either click on Empowering the Spirit, which is a really great resource. There's some amazing things on there that has foundational knowledge and then classroom supports, Orange Shirt Day and beyond. There's lots of stuff on here. So I encourage you to look at that, because always look at the stuff we've done already here locally, which is always a good idea. And then the other thing you can do is you can search for materials on the site that have been created. So you can search by focus, or you can do the TQS. I did a session on that this month, and it goes and takes you right to the outcomes. But here, and then I just go down and click on First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and it comes up, and you can further narrow it down if you like by going by audience level or type, which is really cool. But yeah, there's tons of stuff here done already. So like I said, I encourage you to take a look at that. There's materials that you can use already that are created right for our province and right there. And then there are some materials en français. I don't know specifically what has been done for Indigenous ways of knowing in that sense, but I was speaking to a couple of the teachers when we did meet with ARPDC as a group in the beginning of the month. And that is definitely a goal of theirs, is to get a lot of these resources also available in French. So I want to get going on this because I do have a lot of stuff to present to you. My presentations tend to be resource intensive because I know as a teacher myself, I want to understand what I'm going to be doing, but I also want lots of resources. When I go to sessions, I want stuff I can look at and work with myself, and modify it, or just point me in a direction so I can find some stuff for myself for my classrooms. That's what I've tried to do for you guys. I've done this with every one of my new curriculum sessions, so bear with me if you've seen this already, but I just think it's important to kind of hammer this one home. The difference between Indigenous and Western ways of knowing, in the sense that Indigenous knowledges, first of all, have been here for thousands of years. So what is available here in North America or Turtle Island are teachings that have been passed down for, like I said, thousands of years, generations and generations and generations. So there are things that have helped all of us. I know from my family, especially being Métis, we would not have survived if it was not for the Indigenous part of our family, that the women particularly, but and the men that were their relatives as well, that helped us to learn how to live on this land and become an Indigenous people that was that combination of European and Indigenous. But because we embraced that, right, and to live on the land, at least at first, particularly I'll say later very colonized, but at first that's how people survived. And those who first came to Canada, period, right, they survived because the Indigenous people here were willing to help the people that came. But it's really important to know too, as I'm just show you this, it's like a 7-pager, but I've included it because I like to make sure that teachers have kind of something to look at and refer back to if you're trying to explain it to somebody else that you're working with. The Indigenous system is very interrelated. Everything is interrelated. We look at a medicine wheel, a sharing circle, we do round dances, everything's in a circle, right? Because we're all interconnected and interrelated. Everything is equal on that circle, above it, below it, across from it, behind it, right? It's just the way it is. And you're always looking at, how are you living your life? How are you treating others? How are you treating the earth? So it's all about relationship. Everything that we do is about relationship and that interconnectedness. Western knowledges, as having taught in it, and I've done all my education through it, is very disconnected in many ways. Trying to draw those connections, is actually often how we write essays, right? Is trying to draw analogies to connect things, whereas it's very obvious with Indigenous ways of knowing that everything is connected. So really looking at everything as, an object of study, under a microscope, as opposed to a thing that is connected to us. Being a rock is connected to me, the sun is connected to me, everything is connected to me, including other people and animals. Um, just so that, when you're trying to do this work, it's really important that you're not weakening Indigenous traditions by generalizing and taking them out of context. And what I mean by that is, we don't want to take the teaching and fit it into the lesson and water it down for the lesson. It should be, this is the truth of it. This is how it is taught, however, whomever you're getting this teaching from or learning from. And the lesson itself is fitting into that. So if that makes sense to anybody. I had this discussion with a fellow educator, Jason Big Charles, and I were talking about that, and he was actually, I think, pleasantly surprised that I felt exactly the same way, because I was like, you can't take the knowledge that is Indigenous and dilute it that way. It doesn't work, right? And then you're doing a disservice as a teacher when you do that. So it's just really important to understand that. And then denying cultural differences in order to find commonality is really important. You don't do that as well. So what I mean by that is, for instance, Cree speakers exist across Canada, from Quebec to BC, all across the prairies. There's 5 different language dialects. But even within that, like I said, I worked with Kataskanau. That was a Cree nation, but there were 5 of them together. 2 of them were very different because they were very Catholic. The other 3 embraced spirituality as well. So when I created the curriculum, I had to be very careful how I did that, and create options that were available for them that would not necessarily use certain things that they would not like. So, no, that's just one example, but I mean, you can't assume that because there's 5 nations that are living close together that have formed a tribal band, that they all agree on everything. So that's really important to understand as well. And so when I teach anything, I always say, this is the teaching that I have received, because different elders teach different ways. How they've received their teachings a different way. It doesn't make it wrong, because there's commonalities amongst everything that's done. Some of the protocols are a little bit different, and it's by culture. So it's just like any other culture around the world. You'll find that, right? Even if you go to another country, and like, I think of the example when I went to England, and my nana's family was in Leeds, and there's 3 particular, what you call suburbs almost, that are intertwined almost. But they explained it to me like they all have their own idioms. They even have their own their language is almost different. It's really strange. And even some different cultural practices. And that's in England, and it's 3 groups of people that are living very close together. So I think that's a really good example, because when you think of English speakers, you think of a place like England, you don't think of that happening, but that is true there as well, right? The last one is assimilating Indigenous knowledge in a way that it becomes invisible. So we don't want to just be paying homage to it and hanging something on the wall, like, we're just wearing an orange shirt and saying I did that kind of thing. It's about what purpose it is. Honoring it is the truth of those people that you're talking about. So I think that's just important as well. And I think that helps you to avoid things like appropriation. And I know teachers are always very worried about that. So I want to get right into the PE and wellness, so that I got through all that stuff for you guys. So what I'm looking at is the organizing ideas when I'm doing this. When I looked at the new curriculum, I thought, it's interesting the way it's organized. It's very different than previously. And for me, it just seemed easier in every single subject when I was presenting to look at the organizing ideas, right? So we're looking at the active living, the movement, skill development, character development, safety, healthy eating, healthy relationships, growth and development, and financial literacy. Now, really the only one here that doesn't necessarily fit in directly is financial literacy, I think at this level anyways, because when we get to junior high and senior high, we can certainly look at, and you could even talk about some of the trading and bartering practices of Indigenous peoples. You could do that with financial literacy, but I don't know that there's going to be time or room in the elementary PE and wellness curriculum to do that, quite honestly, right? I think that's more something that's going to happen later. So I've really focused on these other areas. So first I want to look at the movement part, right? So that's probably the one that we focus on the most in PE at this point too. So we look at Indigenous dances. So I wanted to kind of give you guys some background and just some general information if you've never gone to powwows and you don't understand Indigenous First Nations dancing. Mainly, I mean, there's some Métis stuff I'm going to show you as well, but mainly that. You can show videos of it. You could bring in a dancer, because there's it's pretty, it's strenuous stuff. And the way that it was done originally too is not the way it's done now. Like, people were outside in the sun the whole time because there were no pavilions built back then, or enclosures or arenas, right? Everybody was outside the entire time, rain or shine. So it could be raining the whole time, it could be hot, hot, hot the whole time. And these people were out there enduring, and it was an endurance test, really, part of it, right? And because it's a spiritual thing as well. It wasn't a competition in that sense, it was a spiritual thing for healing and for prayer for your people. And so each of these dances had a particular focus for that, right? So I just like everybody to know that as well. We see it now as mainly like this competition thing, which it has turned into mainly, that wasn't the original intent of it. So when we look at powwow dancers, there's the male and female categories. And for the men, there's the grass dance, which is, I have to say, my favorite. I love it because it's amazing, right? Because I grew up in the prairies too. I grew up in Manitoba, and just that watching in the men dance and the grass dance is just watching the grass swaying in the wind, right? And it's just beautiful, and just the way that they move, and it just reminds me so much of those tall prairie grasses and moving. And a lot of the time that was the first dance that was done, and as you can see there, it says some believe this dance is done to prepare the grounds for the powwow. So when there was grasslands is literally what they were dancing on, and yeah, they cut down some of that grass to to have a space to dance, but the men would do this dance and it would really wear down that grass area too, so that the other dancers could come in. And then there's traditional dancing, and that really evokes the warrior and the protector. So again, if you think about that spiritually, that's that whole idea of protecting your family and your entire group of people that are there. The fancy dance, which is the one that's really energetic and colorful, and then the prairie chicken, which is heavy duty intensive to watch somebody do that, and it's exhausting even just to watch them do it. So I'm always amazed. But I've got a couple of links in here for you guys too. There's lots of videos online that you can watch on YouTube, and I do have a separate PE session that I do just period on that. But this I thought would give you a little bit of information on the background of it. And really it does reflect on the spirituality, history, and culture of the First Nations people on Turtle Island. And I love that one. There's a picture of the forks in Winnipeg. But yeah, like just give you some background information too, so a little bit more. And it does talk about regional variations. And like, for instance, there's the crow hop, which is the crow of Montana. There's a rabbit dance for the Sioux. There's a chicken dance for Northern Plains. Like, there's a few different dances. They're all variations kind of on that. The hoop dance, which you probably know about, which is Anishinaabe, right? But those are generally not included at the powwows. Those are kind of separate, like the hoop dance in particular, and there's huge world competitions. And that, if you know about Dallas Arcan and then his son, Dallas Arcan Jr. And I should remember the name of the other guy. Oh, I feel bad right now. It just slipped my mind. But anyways, another dancer, he's amazing too, that I watch on YouTube, and he got him on Facebook and on Instagram. Just amazing. Always amazes me. And then I've included this as well. This is an Alberta teachers resource as well. So I thought I'd include this since it's already created for you. It works, for your students too, just to understand First Nations, Métis, and Inuit dancing, and they give you again a little bit more there. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the round dance and Métis jigging as well. And then there's the female categories as well. Did move that down, sorry. So there's the traditional, which is the one that you probably, if you've seen the ladies, they go up and down and up and down. They've got this slow, it's like sometimes it's a little bit slower, a bit faster, but the walk. And then they often have like their eagle feathers in front of them, and they just look really beautiful and dignified. Then there's the fancy shawl, which is of course that's my favorite, I have to say. Like, I like the jingle dance too, it's really cool, but the fancy shawl is always really pretty. And I love when the little kids go out, the little girls go out and they have their shawls. And I saw some this summer and they were just so cute. But it's about beauty and freedom, right? And then the jingle dance is a healing dance. And of course, with the jingle dance too, you can get into looking at some of the history with the kids, about how that's changed. The jingle dance used to be, the pieces that are on the dress used to be things that were collected from the prairies that they used to make that noise. But once Europeans arrived, they were able to take, I believe it's from the tobacco cartons. They took the materials in there, the tin, and they would take it and create these pieces to make the jingle sound and the bell inside. So see how that's changed as well, right? With the advent of Europeans coming. So there's a round dance, which in the winter, so that we tend to, once the snow starts to fly and you can't have powwows, which were traditionally outside. And then of course the venues for most of the powwows are open, like they're mostly pavilions, right? So they're open and you sit inside them. So if it was snowing, that wouldn't work too well. It would get very cold because even when it's raining or chilly out, it's a little bit of a test to sit there sometimes, but we get through it. But then I decided to give you this. It's just how to take part in a round dance. And a round dance is for everybody. So this is always something you can do at school too, which is always fun. If you've got someone that could teach you, if not, then there are videos online that you can look at. But just giving you some ideas, about your hand particularly, right? So your left hand is always facing up and your right hand is facing down. So when you're holding on to people, this is how you go around the circle and then you step as you go to the left with one foot, right? And so it's about the heartbeat of Mother Earth. Don't worry about your feet too much, but it's a friendship dance, right? And then people can sit and watch. And there's a video there. Like I said, that one's the best one. That's one I usually use when I do the just PE session. But what to know before you go, and you can always get the kids to do that. And there's music that you can play online on YouTube and that you could get the kids to try around dance. But it's a dance of unity, right? It's to bring everyone together. And so it's something you can teach the kids, no problem. And then there's Métis jigging, and I'm not going to get into this too much, but it's again too, Métis jigging is not a spiritual dance. So when I say that, like the other ones, you could probably get somebody to come in and show you possibly, how to dance, or, like I said, you could watch the videos, but it's not something you'd want to do on your own without somebody there to teach. But Métis jigging is not that I've ever heard it being referred to as a spiritual exercise, right? It was for our people. It was it's fun. I mean, it's really a combination of the prairie chicken dance and the Scottish, Irish, and French dancing all in one, and it's put together. And there is a video called "The History of the Métis Jig" online if you ever wanted to watch that, and it will explain that a little bit more to you. But I did include a couple, like I don't have time to go through all these videos, but you can watch, and there's something you could do with the kids, in your PE class. You could actually go through that. Then I want to look at the games. So there are games definitely you can incorporate for that movement piece. It's also about character. So this is really important too. And that's why I like to point it out. Indigenous games of, for PE, they all, I don't know, put that, everything is supposed to be done in a mindful way. Everything is. So there is always that piece for that wellness. There's always a piece that is spiritual. Now, I'm not saying to teach that to the kids in terms of they need to be doing that, because that's not our place in school to be teaching the kids that. I mean, unless you're, in a faith-based school, and you're teaching your faith to those children that the parents have chosen. But you can point it out, right? You can explain to them that this is done in a spiritual way as well, because you always have to be mindful of how you're treating others and be mindful of what you're doing in front of Creator and all that stuff, right? So with that said, in terms of character development, these are kind of some of the things that people maybe don't understand about Indigenous games. So while you're doing them, that's to honor those who gave you the most challenge. So after you're done the game, it's not a matter of being angry with that person or jealous or frustrated with them. You honor that person that challenged you the most, and thank them because they made you step up, basically, right? And taught you something. You are supposed to respect the rules of the competition. And again, there are different rules and tools for many different tribes, but basically, so it's always a great way to explain things to kids too about character, right? To respect your competitors is really important. You actually embarrass your family, your entire family, and all of your ancestors before and after you, if you behave in a poor manner. And that's really what ends up happening. It's looking before and after you to realize that what you do affects everyone that has lived and will live. So it's not a little thing to behave disrespectfully. It's about having courage, intuition, persistence, and patience in planning. So trying to instill all of those things in kids that we want them to have. To be humble when you win, right? It's not something where we're boastful. You're not supposed to be. Obviously helping others be the best they can. So if somebody needs help on the other side of the team, on the other team, then you are going to try to help them, right? If they fall down or hurt themselves, obviously you help them get up. You don't laugh at them and say, oh, look what happened to you, right? You're not supposed to, right? And then recognize how your environment contributes to your quality of life and respect it. So particularly because all these things took place outside. And so we have to really be mindful of our environment. So Indigenous games, traditionally, and like I said, I did all this last night or this morning and it moved things. So I'm sorry about that. I'll have to move that back. The men and women traditionally played games separately, so they were not together. And then the children played modified versions of adult games. And so there's two types of games. Those are the games of chance and the games of skill. And the one we're talking about are the games of skill. And it's always a good idea to try to find those that are closest to you in terms of the cultures that are around you. And so I've tried to include some different links for you to find some Indigenous games for the young ones. So this particularly, when I found this, it's called the Playbook, Indigenous Games in the Classroom, and it's an amazing resource. There's yeah, it really just goes over all the different games, why to include them, why should you play these, and then so it's got a lot of pedagogy in here as well. And it was created with elders, so that's really cool. This happens to be a Métis teacher from BC. But used the local people there. So I just think it's a really good example to follow. And she does go over, explain the holistic relationship of games for Indigenous peoples. And so there's that there, as well as being experiential. It's really important in place-based education. So, and then, that idea of being intergenerational, like I said, passing these down. And I think these are things you can point out to younger kids, like you can explain in their way about how everything is connected, and it's really important, right? That these games have been played for, we don't know how many generations, which is really cool, right? And if you think about a game like basketball, for us it's old, but it was created in the early 1900s, I think, right? It was created by, I know, a Canadian educator who was a local college in the United States, but I mean, they created that. But if you think about these Indigenous games, some of them may have been played for like over 1,000 years. That's pretty cool, right? To teach kids about that. Yeah, so anyways, I included this, and like I said, it does have a lot of different information in here for you, and then it's got tons of games that you can look at. You want to use any of those. And then this is a K-3, but I just thought like some of these do overlap for sure, but I wanted to give you as enough information as possible so that you can look at this. Hand games, those are Dene games. There's a moccasin game or moccasin, stick games, lacrosse, but I like it because this is the sweetest picture of the two. This little boy drumming. I love it. Anyways, there's just a few. The run and scream game, which is a Blackfoot game if you happen to be in this area. It's been hard to find some Blackfoot activities online and that, so I'm doing a session later to work on that too in the chat. Oh, yeah, very cool. Yeah, I know there's some really neat stuff, right? Oh, and then I've got this document. I know when I was doing a presentation the other day, somebody pointed it out and I was like, oh, what is that one? And then I looked it up. I was like, yes, I have seen that one before because this is a really good document too. And this one is really cool because it also has kind of like it gives you an idea of the communities where they're located. So obviously this is supposed to be a Canadian map and they've just got the colors there, but it's just neat the way that they've laid it out. And then as you go through it, right, they've got, it's like if you could print this out almost like cards, right? And so you've got an explanation of the age groups, how many, how to play, what space, what equipment, and how you'd modify the equipment, right? So what would be traditional equipment, and then what would you create or buy that would be different? And then you could explain that to the kids too, right? Like traditionally, most like things would be sticks you found outside, or they'd be bones from an animal, that sort of thing, right? That you would use, particularly like the bone game, right? Literally it would be bones, but you could use popsicle sticks, right? Like you can, like it says large tongue depressors, you could take that. But again, you can explain to the kids, this is traditionally, this is what it would have been. And you could probably find pictures online for sure to do that. Anyways, like I said, I'm not going to go through every single thing, but there's also some stuff on here, like about food, homemade spruce tea, some different food things in here too, like find a talking stick and how to decorate your talking stick or token, how to do some sharing circles. Anyways, so there's a few different things in here that were kind of neat too, as well as the games. And then I wanted to include this as well. This is from Saskatchewan, I believe. That's right. Looking on here. Oh no, actually, this must be. I think that I might be speaking. I could be wrong. Anyways, but yeah, I just there's a whole list. Plus, they had a lot of the links to some of the stuff I gave you guys for dancing, but extra ones, right? So they've got a bunch of stuff, powwow ones on here as well, including the crow hop, and they've got the double beat, and they've got a few extras. They've got some other games as well there too. So I thought that was kind of cool. Oh, sorry, included that twice. It was so good, I included it twice for you. I know I removed that earlier too. Anyways, this is actually a video. I'm thinking my internet was goofing up earlier when I was working on this morning. So some of those things are different.
Mr. Christie once said, if life gives you lemons, fudge you. Hey, what's up, everybody?
So again, like it's a 12-minute video and I don't have time to show you this, but he does go through, and I will just take, you know, how you can kind of skip ahead a little. Oh, no, it's going to go back to the other game. Sorry, I went too far. There's going to be an Inuit game, but it does have examples of all the different Inuit games. Like, and you know how they have the games in the north, and they do like a whole, gosh, it's like a whole week. It's almost like, I think, almost international type games from people across the north that come and play. And so there's a competition. There's like a world competition there, and they go over how to play a lot of the games. So I included that. Then I wanted to talk about some of the land-based activities and outdoors. So really important, and we're actually moving this expression from land-based activities to cultural-based activities or culture-based activities. And the reason that when I spoke to Jason Big Charles, he was saying it has to do with the understanding of, or the lack, I don't want to say it like that, I don't like to use it negatively, but it really refers to the lack of understanding of non-Indigenous educators, particularly for funding, to not understand that you can do land-based activities inside as well, because everything comes from the land. Like I can do one inside using a rattle and a drum and like some medicines and things like that, right? Like those are all from outside. I can bring those inside. Ideally, we're outside doing it, right? But I mean, if it's 40 below, or in this case now, you know, when I was a kid in Manitoba, we still went outside when it was minus 30, but you know, for lunch and for recess, but we now know that's not a safe thing to do for kids. So, you know, if it's minus, I believe 20 below or more, that's when kids are not allowed to go outside safety wise. I believe that's what it is. I'm trying to remember exactly what it was in school. So, you know, there's going to be times in the winter, especially if you've got a cold snap and you want to do some of these activities, you know, there's videos you can watch. There's, like I said, you can bring in some activities. You could bring in an elder, a knowledge keeper, or somebody you know that's local that could do some of this. It could still do it inside. It's still what we'll call land-based, but culture-based, right? But they should be intentional. And by that, I mean, not outdoor education, right? Outdoor education is awesome. But that's getting kids outside for the sake of getting fresh air, which is amazing. And it's always great, but it's not learning about Indigenous ways of knowing about the land or on the land. It should be local and related to Indigenous ways of knowing. So if possible, try to get that local knowledge from wherever you are. I always encourage people to do that, because local is going to really give you that good information on the local plants, how people that lived there for thousands of years have used the things that are around there, you know, what animals were there originally and what they were used for before things were cleared. It's also great to use, like for wellness, you can focus on the medicine wheel and really talk about that in relation to outdoor activities. You could, if you were, you know, if you're able to, depending on where you are in the province, obviously, and what resources are close to you, and, you know, if you're able to go on field trips, or happen to be, if you happen to be farther north, whatever, you might be able to do more of this. But some of the trapping things, or visit a trap line and see what they do, or fishing, the harvesting can even be medicines that are around you. You could even create your own garden. I do a session on that as well, a school garden to do that. Talking about hunting practices and animal tracking. I used to do animal tracking with my kids. I homeschooled them, and go to Kananaskis country, in the wintertime, and took a tracking book, with all the pictures. I've still got it with all the different animal tracks, and go outside and take pictures of it, right? What animals were there. Go on medicine walks. And Jason Big Charles actually has a video on how to do, medicine harvesting and how to follow the protocols for that. So there's things that are online as well you can find. So you don't have to have somebody with you to do some of that. Building fires, obviously they're young ones, you're not going to do that, but the older ones, you could even show them how to do some of that. And or if there's an elder knowledge keeper there to show them. And of course, those games that can be played outside, that's an easy way to integrate it. There are some, like I said, like Métis Crossing is a great place if you happen to be close to there. I have yet to be able to get there, but I would love to go. There is this short little video I will.
As we draw our attention to the breath, we watch our businesses grow, we face our fear of risk, and realize that embracing change should be easy.
Zoom, you can exclude them, but it's hard sometimes.
We are on the beautiful site of Métis Crossing. We're an hour and a half northeast of Edmonton. Tales from a Métis trap line. It's about the life of Métis trappers from the either 1800s or to the early 1900s. It's about the trappers and how they would go check out their trap lines, and how they would leave their homes and put on their snowshoes, what pack they would take with them, and how to make a small shelter if they got caught out, overnight. And we experience all the sights, the sounds, the smells, the feelings, and the silence of being back on the land. Métis Crossing is very significant because of the past, the history that's here. We need to know where we've been to know where we are going. There's such a joy in seeing kids when they touch furs and ask questions, put on snowshoes, and what it's like to run through the snow, what it's like to be walking in their ancestors' footprints. And we want you to come back to make more footprints, to learn who we are, our culture, our crafts, our food, from other people to come here and to share in that. It's good. It's like home to me. There's something about this place that has a healing effect. You want to recharge? Come on out to Métis Crossing. Come walk with me, because it's a journey that you won't forget. Wow, Métis Crossing.
Well, welcome, or come here. It's a Cree, but it's also in Michif as well. So that idea, obviously that would be a big kind of field trip, but that might be something you could do. I know here in Calgary, there's actually something that just started. I went to this summer. It's called the Métis Experience, and it's around Highfield Road. And it's just amazing. It's got this little forested area, and they actually have like a red river cart built there. They've got a trapper's tent, like you saw, put up there, and they explained, more about how they did that. My grandpa was a fisherman. My family didn't trap, as far as I know, at least not my direct family. And so I didn't really have a lot of experience with that. So it was kind of cool to learn about some of that stuff. And, but they have a lot of different things that they can do there. But like there are around the province, like I've included a couple of different links here as well. Painted Warriors is not directly Indigenous specifically, but they do Indigenous outdoor activities. Same thing around the Edmonton area. And then Taking It Outside, which is the Edmonton Community Foundation. They also do some of that work too. So there are some people that you can either go to them or they can come to you as well. I did want to include for character education, the 7 grandfather teachings. Now, this is an Anishinaabe, right? Teachings, Ojibwe, and Cree also have teachings that fall into this category. They don't specifically have animals to represent each one, which is probably why it's easiest to use this, especially with young children. And so I did include a link to here as well. The link that's here is a PDF, and it goes through each of the teachings and what each animal represents in the story. Again, I don't have tons of time to go through each one, but it's amazing that what you can do with this. Again, this is a video, and I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but for the young ones, I wanted to include this for you as a link when you get the Google Slides. Now, it says the 7 sacred teachings animals, and I, again, because these are spiritual teachings, when I would use it in a public school or any other school in Alberta, I would just say the 7 grandfather teachings. But I mean, you could exclude, the beginning of this, or just explain that to the children that it is sacred to the Anishinaabe people. If you are close to Cree people, there are teachings, like I said, that are similar. Well, I mean, everybody has very similar teachings to this, no matter where you live, in the Blackfoot as well. Dene, everybody does. So you could find out what their teachings are specifically that relate to this. But like I said, because it's got the animals in it, it's pretty cool, for young ones especially. Now I'm going to show you this resource. I developed it with the Edmonton SPCA last year. I was their consultant on this to make sure that they were getting all the information correct in regard to Indigenous ways of knowing and being. Now there's one for grades 1 to 2 and one for grades 3 to 6. Now I'm going, in terms of time, and like there, because if you look down here, there's Google Slides as well for each one. There's video links, there's website links too. And so I'm going to show you the teacher guide for 3 to 6 and the student program as well, just so that you can see. The artwork in here is amazing too. I'm trying to remember the lady's name that did it. Amy Movald, right? She is Cree and Métis. But it goes through very linearly, like it's 10 days, I believe, of teachings. And they've included links for everything they've gone through and made the lessons. Like I didn't do that part. I consulted for them on each one and how they should go about it, and gave them resources. And like, especially if you see the stuff along the side in the purple, that was particularly stuff that I pointed out to them that should be included for Indigenous ways of knowing, right? Like, why are each of these animals? I tried to include things for them, in terms of like additional information and that sort of thing. Yeah, so anyways, there's that. And then there's a book that goes with each one for the kids, so you'll see how these line up. There's the activity booklet. And I think they've laid it out beautifully. But for the older ones, they're going to do match the words and the name and the teaching. For the young ones, they do like a connect, and then they've got this song, number 7 by William Prince, and he's won Juno Awards, and they've got a link for his video as well. And then for the older ones, of course, they can do a little bit more writing. In this case, they're going to write a letter, right? Respect. They're going to do some mind mapping and talk about the environment and respect. Honesty. They've given some examples of things that happen and what would you do in this case, right? So getting the kids to think about those different situations. What do they believe is courage, right? So really linking it. They've got a KWL activity, so just lots of stuff. And then the truth one too, using the turtle, you could also even throw in talking about the calendar, right? So when you learn about math and time, you could talk about the Indigenous calendar being based on the moon. So there's that. And then I did include a link for this one. Now, this goes along actually with a series of videos, but they do have some information here with some teachings in it too. So I just thought I'd throw this in, that it has some ideas for stories, for, like if you're looking at some of the things that you're using in the video, and some other ideas. So creative storytelling and activities that you can include for it as well. And then I also think for wellness particularly, oh, sorry, I'm gonna who's in the chat. Oh, thanks, Sheila. Yeah, I thought the one with the SPCA turned out so well. And I was amazed. And then they keep crediting me so much, and I'm like, gosh, you guys did the lessons. All I did was consult, so I didn't do that much. And then the medicine wheel, of course, you can always use that for wellness, right? Because we can talk about the seasons of the year and all the different things about your life and your body, like talking about those connections between the mind, the heart, the soul, and the body, right? However you want to do that. Just talking about, how we progress through life. And I'm not going to get into all the videos because I wanted to include them for you guys who have them, but this is a story about the medicine wheel and the 4 directions as well. And just about how those things are linked, right? And number 4 is a sacred number for Indigenous peoples on Turtle Island, right? So we talk about the 4 directions on the medicine wheel. It's really important too. So that's something you can also include to talk about that. Number 4 is important in many different cultures and within different religions and things like that too. So there's that story, and it's about the hoop dancer too, so you can learn a little bit more about dancing. And then I wanted to include some lesson ideas. I have shown this one before, but I love this lesson this teacher did. She's amazing. I hope she gets all the recognition that she should, because this, I know this is now like 3 years, but I'll never stop showing this one. I think she did an amazing job. So this is about classroom rules. And I do know, like, I know when I was doing elementary, a lot of times you guys don't have a specialist necessarily for PE anymore. Like in the schools, the classroom teacher is responsible sometimes, or another teacher will take turns, you know, so somebody else gets a break. But either way, this is just one I thought I'd show you. She does it as classroom rules. So getting the kids to all brainstorm their ideas, which she did here, and then they organize them, you know, based on their mind, the heart, spirit, and body, and what were their classroom rules. And then the kids put them on a medicine wheel, put it up in their classroom. And so of course they've done these rules, they buy into them now because they created them. And the other cool thing was, in the article they talk about a little boy who came into the classroom, and he was Indigenous, and of course because Winnipeg has the second highest population of Indigenous people outside of Regina, and he came into the classroom and he saw the medicine wheel right away, and he felt at home, right? He said, oh, you guys have the medicine wheel on the wall. So that was really cool that he felt like he was a part of things right away. So I thought that was also a really cool thing. So it's a great organizer, it's great for wellness, but then it also, you know, makes sure that those Indigenous students that you have feel like they're part of the school. Because often we don't feel that way. I know I didn't growing up, and I was in Manitoba and it was Métis land right there, right? That's where we were. Anyways, I also included this medicine wheel teachings, and I know it goes beyond the wellness piece, but I wanted to include that. So you have some other ideas in there. Goes through all the different areas. There's so many things you can do with the medicine wheel, and that's, you know, the main one there for wellness, of course, right? But there's also, because that way you've got these to print off too if you want, so you don't have to go and create it from scratch. And then some other teachings. Oh, sure, that was the Ontario one. And I did take that one out. I didn't have to go through this thing, and guessing my internet was goofy this morning. It's annoying. I did want to include some pedagogy as well for you. So it just gives you some of that framework of the Anishinaabe teachings of the medicine wheel for teachers, so that again, you can go through it. And I always let everybody know that's a generic medicine wheel, right? Every group of people has their own teachings, specific cultural teachings for their medicine wheel. And whether or not they want to share that with you, with their close to you, they may not want to, because those are often I wouldn't say guarded, but I mean, when you have teachings, you want them to stay within your community, right? You want people to be using them correctly. You don't just throw teachings around. So I want people to understand that those teachings are not, it's not like you're guarding them because you don't want anybody to know, it's because you don't want them to be used improperly. You want people to understand them within the context, like I said, of all that interrelatedness. So it's okay to use the generic one as long as you're explaining to kids that it's generic. And then this gives you a little bit also that background too for teachers, understanding the interconnectedness, balance, respect, wholeness, and interrelationship. And then the sharing circle too, right? You can use that in PE. Again, not going to get into tons of stuff that. I do a separate session entirely on this, but I want to include that. And then the Pass the Feather link has some protocols on there specifically for how to do it. I do know sometimes I've had a question about appropriation, about the talking stick, or whatever you're going to use to pass it around. I myself have used like a rock or something like that and passed it around and just got the kids to use that. If you want to use a talking stick, it is a good idea to either get that teaching given to you by somebody in the community, or buy one from an Indigenous creator if you can, or get them to teach you to do it. It's always a good idea. And then food and nutrition. And now I think it's really important also to understand that, like there is a First Nations, Métis, and Inuit food guide. And I think that could also be pointed out to the children as to why there's a different one, right? And partly it's because there are different foods on there. So that's a great way to teach about the different foods, right? And looking at that, right? For instance, you really focus on things like berries, right? Because those are traditional wild plants. We talk about, you know, different alternatives for, you know, like meat, like traditional meats and wild game and things like that, which most people would not necessarily eat. And I think as you get into some of the older grades, obviously like getting into grade 6, you could also talk about how the Indigenous way of life was affected and how people started to eat in a way that was not very good for them. So there's a high rates of diabetes and heart disease and things like that. I know amongst the Métis, particularly back home, we actually have worse health rates than the First Nations people do now, which is crazy, right? So there's a huge initiative in Manitoba with the Manitoba Métis Federation to put money into the wellness programs for our people because people just not been eating properly because they, or also the other part of it too is you eat a lot of traditional foods, but you're not doing the same work you used to. Like when my grandpa was a fisherman and then he worked on a loading dock, I mean, he would put bacon grease on his porridge, but the man was in his 60s, like 60s, and still doing that job, and he needed that. You know, he would eat some stuff that I just thought was gross, right? But it was high in fat content and it got him through those days when he needed that food, and it was cheap because we didn't have a lot of money. So but anyways, I thought I'd include some, you know, Indigenous recipes too that you could look at, and talking about what are Indigenous foods like. This is from Ontario, but it's not that much different than other things that we do around Canada. But yeah, I wanted to include those for you guys as well. Yeah, so I'm at the questions. So I'm going to stop recording now.